You know what's hilarious? Standing in formation with beings that look like they walked straight out of a fever dream while a six-armed, iridescent instructor hovers above you on anti-grav boots, wondering how your species managed to discover fire. Welcome to just another day at the Galactic Military Academy, where being human is apparently the cosmic equivalent of being that weird cousin nobody wants to invite to family reunions. Cadet Zenna Rodriguez stood at attention, fighting the urge to scratch her nose while Commander Sci-Vex's compound eyes studied her with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for examining pond scum. The commander's crystalline exoskeleton shimmered with barely contained disdain. Cadet Rodriguez Sci-Vex's translator chirped in that insufferably pleasant tone all official AI used. Please explain to the class how your species managed to achieve space flight without mastering quantum entanglement first. A ripple of what passed for laughter among the alien cadets spread through the formation. To her left, a Virgosi cadet's tentacles writhed in amusement, while to her right, a ZX Thou student's bioluminescent spots, pulsed in what she'd learned, was their equivalent of pointing and giggling. We strapped ourselves to controlled explosions and hoped for the best, Sir Zenna replied with a deadpan expression that would have made any poker player proud. The alien cadets fell silent, their various anatomical features frozen in horror. Commander Sci-Vex's middle right arm twitched a sign of extreme distress among the NX Tauri species. That's barbaric, squeaked a jellyfish-like Medusan cadet floating nearby. Actually, Sir Zenna continued, maintaining her serious expression, we prefer the term resourceful. Commander Sci-Vex's crystalline structure shifted through several shades of purple, a clear sign of existential distress. This is exactly why the primitives quota is a mistake. The Galactic Council's diversity initiative has gone too far. Ah yes, the infamous primitives quota, the galaxy's most patronizing affirmative action program, requiring the prestigious Galactic Military Academy to accept a certain number of students from developing species. Because apparently mastering nuclear fusion before learning to teleport was considered doing things in the wrong order. With all due respect, Commander Zenna said, standing straighter, humanity's primitive solutions have gotten us this far. We made it to the stars while still arguing about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. The blank stares from her alien classmates reminded her that cultural references were probably a waste of good sarcasm. The commander's crystalline structure now resembled a disco ball having an existential crisis. Yes, Sci-Vex waved three arms dismissively, while using another to adjust his anti-grav settings. Your species' peculiar determination is noted. However, here at the Academy, we follow proper galactic protocols. No more of this controlled explosion nonsense. A quantumite student, basically a sentient cloud of probability functions, condensed itself into what might have been a raised hand. Commander, is it true that humans still use projectile weapons, like actual physical objects? Unfortunately, Sci-Vex sighed, all six arms drooping dramatically. Though we're working on correcting such primitive instincts, the Galactic Military Academy has standards to maintain after all. Zenna bit back another retort. She'd learned that explaining humanity's primitive achievements often just made things worse. Try telling a species that evolved with natural telekinesis that building the pyramids with ramps and rollers was actually impressive. She'd tried once. The poor Mindweaver had to take a mental health day to recover from the shock. Still, as she stood there in formation, watching Commander Sci-Vex lecture about proper quantum neural interfaces while hovering on his anti-grav boots, she couldn't help but smile. These advanced species might have mastered the fundamental forces of the universe, but they'd never known the simple joy of duct tape fixing literally anything, or the satisfaction of percussive maintenance, also known as fixing electronics by hitting them just right. Let them laugh. Humanity had made it to the stars on sheer stubbornness and coffee. And if there was one thing humans knew how to do, it was proving people, or in this case, various forms of sentient matter wrong. The Galactic Military Academy simulation chamber was a marvel of engineering, capable of recreating any combat scenario across 12 dimensions. Today, it was being used to humiliate humans, because apparently that was just easier than actually teaching them. Welcome to Advanced Combat Scenario 7, Beta Commander Sci-Vex announced, his crystalline form gleaming under the chamber's adaptive lighting. Today's challenge: surviving a quantum anomaly cascade while defending a civilian outpost. Zenna exchanged knowing looks with her fellow human cadets. Marcus Chen, a former hacker from New Shanghai, was already fidgeting with his outdated datapad, the only human tech allowed in the chamber. Beside him, Aisha Patel, who'd once built a fusion reactor in her garage for fun, was examining the chamber's neural interface ports with poorly concealed disdain. Remember, HFY continued, all 6 arms gesturing in what humans had dubbed space jazz hands. Your neural implants will allow you to interface directly with all defensive systems, those without standard neural upgrades. He paused, compound eyes fixed pointedly on the human cadets. We'll have to use manual controls. How? Quaint. The Vergosi team captain, a mass of writhing tentacles named Zex XL, actually had the nerve to pat Zenna on the head with one of his appendages. "Don't worry, Primitive. We'll protect you." "Thanks," Zenna replied dryly. "I'll try not to evolve too quickly and embarrass myself." The simulation began with a flash of quantum distortion. The chamber transformed into a colonial outpost, complete with panicking holograms of civilian refugees. Advanced defense turrets lined the walls, their quantum targeting systems already linking with the alien cadets' neural networks. "This is impossible without neural interfacing," complained the quantumite cadet, their probability cloud forming worried patterns. "The humans should sit this one out." Marcus snorted, fingers flying over his datapad. "Right, because adding more variables to a quantum system always makes it more stable. Have you guys ever heard of KISS?" "Is that some primitive ritual?" asked a curious Medusan. "Keep it simple," stupid Aisha explained, already stripping wires from a nearby control panel. "Sometimes the best solution isn't the most advanced one." The first wave of quantum anomalies hit like a technicolor tsunami. The alien cadets responded with perfect coordination, their neural networks directing energy barriers and phase-locked weapons with surgical precision. It was impressive, really right up until the anomalies adapted. "They're learning our patterns." Zex XL's tentacles twisted in panic as the defense grid started failing. "The neural network can't compute fast enough." "That's because you're thinking in quantum algorithms," Marcus muttered, still typing. "Ever heard of good old-fashioned chaos theory?" While the alien cadets struggled with their failing tech, the humans went full primitive. Aisha had somehow jerry-rigged the power distribution system, using what looked suspiciously like a paperclip and sheer willpower. Marcus's outdated coding was introducing just enough randomness into the defense grid to disrupt the anomaly's learning patterns. And Zenna? She was doing what humans did best, improvising wildly. "Are you using the quantum fluctuations to play Pong with the anomalies?" Commander XIVX's voice cracked with disbelief. "No, sir," Zenna grinned, manually targeting another anomaly. "I'm using them to play billiards. Much more efficient." The alien cadets watched in horror and fascination as the humans' primitive solutions actually started working. The defense grid, now running on what Marcus called hybridized chaos protocols, which was just a fancy way of saying controlled randomness, was holding steady. Aisha's makeshift power distribution system was actually outperforming the neural interfaces. "This is unacceptable." XIVX's crystalline form was cycling through colors faster than a malfunctioning disco ball. "You're not following any of the standard protocols." "With all due respect," Sir Aisha called out while splicing another wire with her teeth, "standard protocols are what the enemy expects. Sometimes you need to think outside the quantum box." The simulation ended with the outpost still standing, though the defense grid looked like it had been redesigned by a caffeine-addicted octopus. The human cadets stood amid their jury-rigged solutions, trying not to look too smug while the alien students gaped at them with various anatomical features. How the quantumite cadet had condensed themselves into a tight, confused ball. "Your solutions violated at least 7 laws of quantum mechanics." 8, actually, Marcus corrected, pocketing his datapad. "But sometimes the laws of physics need a gentle reminder about who's boss." Commander XIVX hovered silently, all 6 arms crossed in what might have been disapproval, confusion, or indigestion. It was hard to tell with crystalline life forms. "While your methods achieved the desired result he finally managed. They were completely unorthodox and potentially dangerous. "Thank you, sir," all three humans replied in unison, taking it as the compliment it wasn't meant to be. As they filed out of the simulation chamber, Zenna couldn't help but notice the alien cadets looking at them differently. Not with the usual condescension, but with something that might have been confusion, might have been fear, or might have been the first glimmer of respect. "You know what they say," Marcus whispered, grinning. "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And any sufficiently primitive solution," Aisha added, "is indistinguishable from genius." It started, as most catastrophes do, during what should have been a routine training exercise. The Academy's quantum core hiccuped, which, as it turns out, is significantly more dramatic than a regular hiccup when you're dealing with technology that can bend reality. The first sign that something was wrong came when Commander X5X's anti-grav boots suddenly decided that up was more of a suggestion than a rule. The sight of their instructor pinwheeling through the air like a drunken butterfly might have been hilarious if not for the growing realization that everything, and they meant everything, was shutting down. Neural networks are offline. A Virgosi cadet's tentacles twisted in panic, their usually synchronized movements now as graceful as a newborn giraffe on ice. "I can't access any of my enhanced abilities." "The quantum defense grid is destabilizing," Marcus announced, his fingers dancing across his trusty primitive datapad. "And before anyone asks, no, turning it off and on again won't help. Though I appreciate that humans aren't the only ones who try that first." Alarms blared throughout the Academy, actual physical alarms, because apparently even advanced aliens understood the value of redundancy when it came to announcing impending doom. The holoscreen in the training hall flickered to life, displaying what appeared to be a virus eating through the Academy's quantum networks. It was beautiful, in the same way that a supernova is beautiful if you ignore the whole devastating destruction part. "This is impossible." Commander X5X had managed to stabilize himself by clinging to a support beam with 3 of his arms. "Our systems are protected by quantum encryption." "Yeah," Aisha muttered, already elbow-deep in an exposed control panel, because nobody ever broke through impossible encryption before. Cough, enigma, cough. The alien cadets were in various states of panic. The Quantumite had dispersed into a cloud of anxious probabilities. The Medusan was literally tying itself in knots, and ZixXL's tentacles had knotted themselves into what looked like a very unfortunate macram accident. "Without our neural interfaces, we can't access any of the defense systems." A ZXDAL cadet's bioluminescent spots were flashing like a rave gone wrong. "We're defenseless." Zenna looked at her fellow humans, a grin spreading across her face that would have made any proper military instructor deeply concerned. "Defenseless? Please, you've got 3 humans who grew up playing video games with actual physical controllers. And one who specifically got into trouble for hacking school systems," Marcus added proudly. "Plus an engineer who believes duct tape is a legitimate building material," Aisha chimed in, pulling said tape from what appeared to be a dedicated pocket. Commander X5X's crystalline form shifted through several shades of what the humans had learned to recognize as skepticism. "You can't possibly suggest that your primitive methods could." He was cut off by the sound of Marcus's triumphant "ha," followed immediately by several systems springing back to life, albeit with significantly more error messages than usual. "Ladies, gentlemen, and various forms of quantum consciousness," Marcus announced, "I give you good old-fashioned manual override. Sometimes the best firewall is one that doesn't rely on quantum uncertainty. The virus is targeting anything connected to the neural network," Aisha explained, somehow managing to look professional while holding together 2 pieces of critical infrastructure with what appeared to be chewing gum. "But guess what doesn't connect to the neural network? Human tech." The alien cadets watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as the humans began implementing what they called Plan B, which, as Zenna had to explain, stood for back to basics, though historically it had meant something far less polite. "Okay, here's the situation." Zenna took charge, her years of playing strategy games finally about to pay off. "The virus is spreading through the quantum networks, but it can't affect physical systems. That means we can still use the manual controls, which nobody's touched since they were installed as backups. But those systems are so basic." A Medusan cadet wobbled uncertainly. Exactly, Aisha was now pulling wires out of walls with the enthusiasm of a kid unwrapping presents. Basic means reliable. Basic means fixable. Basic means we might actually survive this. As if to emphasize her point, another wave of quantum disruption rippled through the academy, causing several more advanced systems to fail spectacularly. A nearby holographic training interface transformed into what appeared to be a cosmic soap opera before fizzling out entirely. Commander Zenna addressed the still skeptical XI Vex. With your permission, we'd like to implement what we call the KISS protocol. Is this another one of your primitive acronyms? Yes, sir. And right now, it's looking like our best option. The commander's crystalline structure vibrated in what might have been a sigh. Very well, Cadet Rodriguez. Proceed with your primitive solutions. What followed was perhaps the most unorthodox defense of a military installation in galactic history. Marcus set up a manual firewall using coding principles so old they predated quantum computing. Aisha began a one-woman crusade to convert critical systems to physical controls, using materials that had the alien cadets questioning their understanding of engineering. And Zenna? She was teaching the alien cadets how to aim without neural targeting assistance, which was going about as well as you'd expect when dealing with species that had never needed to develop hand-eye coordination. No, she corrected a Virgosi who was holding a manual targeting control like it might bite them. You don't need to interface with it mentally. Just point and shoot. Like this, she demonstrated, taking out 3 virus-corrupted defense drones with practiced ease. But how do you compensate for quantum uncertainty, the cadet asked, their tentacles trembling. We don't, Zenna grinned. We just call it missing and try again. Slowly but surely the tide began to turn. The virus, designed to exploit the most advanced systems in the galaxy, found itself completely stymied by technology so old it might as well have been running on steam power. It was like trying to hack a rock, theoretically possible, but hardly worth the effort. Commander XI Vex watched from his perch, all 6 arms crossed in what might have been disapproval, might have been amazement, or might have been an attempt to keep himself from falling over as the anti-grav systems continued to hiccup. I never thought I'd say this, he admitted, as another wave of virus-infected quantum protocols washed harmlessly past their jury-rigged defenses, but perhaps there is something to be said for maintaining alternative methods. Don't worry, Sir Zenna called out while helping a ZX Thal cadet understand the concept of mechanical triggers. We won't tell anyone you complimented primitive technology. Your reputation for being hyper-advanced is safe with us. The crisis wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time since the virus hit, it felt like they had a fighting chance. And all it took was going back about 300 years in technological development. Sometimes the best way forward is to go backward first. The Academy's quantum core chose that exact moment to demonstrate why mixing advanced technology with malicious code was a spectacularly bad idea. The massive cylinder of swirling energy at the heart of the facility didn't just fail, it started to invert, which is exactly as bad as it sounds when you're dealing with something that manipulates the fabric of reality. Well, that's not good, Marcus commented, staring at his datapads readings. The virus isn't just shutting systems down anymore, it's weaponizing them. Weaponizing quantum technology, Commander Xi Vex's crystalline form paled to an almost transparent state. That's impossible. The failsafes are all quantum-based, Aisha finished, yanking another handful of wires from a wall panel, which means they're about as useful as a chocolate teapot right now. The Academy's central hall erupted into chaos as quantum fluctuations began warping reality in increasingly creative ways. A group of Medusan cadets found themselves suddenly speaking in reverse, while a section of the floor decided to redefine its relationship with gravity. A quantumite student accidentally divided by 0 and temporarily ceased to exist. The containment field is failing as ZX Thal cadets' bioluminescent spots were now spelling out error 404 in 12 different languages. The core will collapse in approximately 15 minutes. Zenna looked at her fellow humans, then at the panicking alien cadets, and finally at Commander Xi Vex, who was trying very hard to maintain his dignity while slowly turning upside down. Sir, she said, snapping to attention out of habit, even though attention was becoming a relative concept as local space-time went sideways, requesting permission to implement emergency protocol Hotel Foxtrot Yankee. The commander's compound eyes blinked in confusion. I'm not familiar with that protocol. That's because we just made it up, Marcus admitted. But since the alternative is watching reality get turned inside out, we figured now's not the time to fill out the proper paperwork. HFY's crystalline structure vibrated in what might have been a laugh, or possibly a quantum-induced hiccup. Granted, Cadet Rodriguez, whatever you're planning, it can't possibly make things worse. Challenge accepted, all three humans muttered under their breath. What followed was perhaps the most unorthodox emergency response in galactic history. While the alien cadets struggled with their failing neural interfaces, the humans launched into action with the kind of enthusiasm that made their instructors nervous. Okay, listen up, Zenna's voice cut through the chaos. Marcus, how long can you keep the core stable using manual controls? About 10 minutes if I route everything through my datapad, maybe 12 if I overclock it, but then it might explode. Perfect. Aisha, what can you do with the quantum containment field? Aisha emerged from behind a panel, her uniform covered in what appeared to be quantum coolant and determination. I can redirect the field through physical conduits. It won't be pretty, but it'll hold. The real problem is the core itself. We need to purge the virus without shutting down the whole system, which is impossible without neural interfaces, Commander HFY interjected. Sir, with all due respect, Zenna grinned, impossible is what humans do best. Marcus, remember that game you used to play? The one with the blue hedgehog. Marcus's eyes lit up. You're not suggesting? Oh yes, I am. We're going to speedrun this. What followed was either brilliant strategy or complete insanity, possibly both. While Marcus used his primitive coding skills to keep the core stable, Aisha began converting the quantum containment systems to manual control, using a combination of physical switches, optical cables, and what looked suspiciously like a modified game controller. The virus is targeting anything that operates on quantum principles, Zenna explained to the bewildered alien cadets. So we're going to give it exactly what it expects, then hit it with something so old school it won't know what to do. You want us to fight a quantum virus with game theory of Ergosi cadets' tentacles twisted in confusion. Not just game theory, Marcus called out, his fingers flying over his datapad. We're going to glitch the system. Speedrunners have been breaking games for centuries by finding exploits in the code. Turns out reality has similar bugs when you push it hard enough. Commander HFY, now floating near the ceiling, watched in fascination as the humans implemented their insane plan. Aisha had somehow turned the quantum containment field into what she called a physical firewall, using the actual structure of the academy to create a barrier against the virus. It's like playing the world's most dangerous game of Pong, she explained, adjusting what appeared to be a joystick made from spare parts. The virus tries to get through, we bounce it back. Meanwhile, Marcus had discovered that the virus, for all its quantum complexity, still followed certain patterns. It's like any other speedrun, he muttered, typing furiously. Find the pattern, exploit the mechanics, break the game in your favor. The alien cadets, recovering from their initial shock, began to catch on. Under Zenna's direction, they formed teams to manually operate the now converted defense systems. A Medusan cadet turned out to have surprisingly good reaction time once they stopped trying to use their neural interface. A group of ZX students, their bioluminescent spots now flashing in sync with the emergency lights, proved remarkably adept at coordinating without quantum communication. The virus is adapting, Marcus shouted as another wave of quantum disruption hit. It's trying to merge with the core's programming. Good Zenna's grin would have worried any sane person. That's exactly what we wanted. Everyone get ready for the quantum equivalent of a lag switch. What happened next would later be described in official reports as a tactical implementation of unconventional methodology. What actually happened was that 3 human cadets, armed with nothing but outdated technology and the kind of creativity that comes from growing up playing video games, essentially performed a glitch exploit on reality itself. Marcus's code, deliberately designed to be as primitive as possible, created a momentary pause in the quantum core's processes, something that should have been impossible. In that fraction of a second, Aisha's jerry-rigged containment field redirected the viral code back on itself, while the manual defense systems, operated by increasingly enthusiastic alien cadets, bombarded it with what Zenna called good old-fashioned chaos. The virus, designed to corrupt the most advanced quantum systems in the galaxy, found itself trapped in a loop of physically controlled circuits and mathematically impossible situations. It was like trying to play chess against someone who insisted on using the pieces to build a house instead. The quantum core flared once, twice, and then stabilized, though the swirling energy now appeared to be flowing in several physically impossible directions at once. Did we just break physics? A quantumite cadet asked, their probability cloud forming a question mark. Nah, Marcus replied, finally looking up from his smoking datapad. We just reminded it that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Commander XI-Vex, finally managing to right himself as the artificial gravity stabilized, surveyed the scene. The Academy's advanced systems were slowly coming back online, though several displays now showed what appeared to be primitive human video games. I suppose, he said slowly, his crystalline form shifting through colors of what might have been grudging respect. There is something to be said for maintaining knowledge of alternative methodologies. That's a fancy way of saying sometimes you need to kick it old school, Aisha translated, still holding her makeshift control panel together with what appeared to be hope and habit. The alien cadets were looking at their human counterparts with new eyes or equivalent sensory organs. The Vergosi team captain even attempted a human high five, though with tentacles it came out more like a gentle pat. You know what the best part is? Zenna asked, grinning at Commander XI-Vex. We technically didn't violate any protocols. How do you figure that, Cadet? Well, sir, there's nothing in the rulebook that says you can't save a quantum academy using game theory and the power of human stubbornness. The commander's crystalline form vibrated in what was definitely a laugh this time. I suppose we'll have to update the rulebook. Please don't, Marcus called out. Some of our best work comes from finding loopholes in regulations. As the emergency crews began arriving looking very confused at the sight of ancient human technology interfaced with quantum systems, Zenna couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Sometimes the best way to advance wasn't to embrace the future, it was to remember what worked in the past. After all, humanity hadn't made it to the stars by following the rules. They'd made it by breaking them in just the right way. 2 weeks after what became known as the quantum glitch incident. Or, as the human cadets called it, the great game over, the Galactic Military Academy's training protocols underwent some interesting changes. And by interesting we mean that Commander XI-Vex actually had to admit that humans might have been right about something. The commander stood before the assembled cadets, his crystalline form shimmering with what might have been embarrassment. In light of recent events, the Academy Board has decided to implement new training requirements. All cadets will now be required to complete a course in. He paused, as if the words physically pained him, manual emergency protocols and non-quantum problem solving. You can just call it winging it. 101, Zenna suggested helpfully from her position in formation. The alien cadets, rather than looking scandalized as they once would have, actually nodded in agreement. Furthermore, ex-wives continued, pointedly ignoring the comment, Cadets Rodriguez, Chen, and Patel will be serving as auxiliary instructors for the new course. Marcus looked up from his datapad, which he was now officially allowed to use during training. Does this mean we can finally install some proper arcade games in the recreation area? You know, for training purposes. The commander's crystalline structure cycled through several colors before settling on a resigned blue. The board has approved the installation of selected, historical human entertainment systems, for tactical simulation purposes only, of course. The Vergosi team captain, ZixXL, raised a tentacle. Will we be learning this human concept of button mashing? I found it surprisingly effective during the crisis. Actually, Aisha chimed in, still carrying her now famous emergency toolkit, complete with duct tape. We're starting with something even more basic, the art of percussive maintenance. A quantumite cadet condensed nervously. You mean, hitting things until they work? We prefer the term kinetic troubleshooting, Zenna explained with a straight face. The Academy's halls, once filled with the hum of pure quantum technology, now echoed with the sound of mechanical switches and the occasional satisfying thunk of manual controls. Emergency backup systems, once considered primitive redundancies, were being upgraded and expanded, though upgraded. Sometimes meant adding more physical buttons rather than neural interfaces. I still don't understand, a Medusan cadet wobbled thoughtfully during one of the new training sessions. How do humans function without constant neural connectivity? Same way we survived before smartphones, Marcus replied, teaching a group of fascinated aliens how to use a physical keyboard. Lots of practice, a healthy dose of paranoia, and the unshakable belief that anything can be fixed with enough creativity and spite. The Academy's quantum core, now running on a hybrid system of advanced technology and what Aisha called pure human stubbornness, had never been more stable. The virus, trapped in a loop of physically impossible commands, had become a case study in why sometimes the best firewall was a literal wall. Commander HFY, watching the human cadets teach their alien classmates the finer points of manual dexterity, found himself reevaluating many of his previous assumptions. Perhaps, he admitted during a staff meeting, we became too reliant on advanced solutions. The humans' primitive, alternative methods have proven to have their merits. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said about us, Sir Zenna commented as she passed by with a box of spare parts. Don't worry, we won't let it go to our heads. The primitives quota was quietly renamed the Tactical Diversity Initiative, and suddenly being human at the Academy wasn't just tolerated, it was actually considered valuable, though some things never changed. No, Cadet XXL, Aisha sighed during a practical exercise. You cannot fix a quantum fluctuation with duct tape alone. You need at least some wire and possibly a paperclip. The Academy's next recruitment cycle saw an unprecedented number of applications from developing species. Apparently, word had gotten out that sometimes the best way to handle advanced technology was to think like someone who hadn't invented it yet. As for Zenna, Marcus, and Aisha, they graduated with honors, though their official commendations had to include a new category, excellence in unconventional problem solving. They went on to become legends at the Academy, not for mastering quantum mechanics or neural interfaces, but for proving that sometimes the best solution wasn't the most advanced one. And if some of the alien cadets started carrying primitive toolkits alongside their quantum processors, well, as Commander HFY now liked to say, though he'd deny it if quoted, the mark of true advancement is knowing when to take a step backward. The humans just called it common sense. But then again, they were primitive like that.